doubts about the commercial viability of printing and selling a cookbook. It had never been done. But the last word hadn't been spoken yet. Mennonite women across the United States and Canada bought the cookbooks with all the enthusiasm with which they had sent in recipes, and that was considerable. The first printing was sold out in no time flat. So the John C. Winston Company reprinted it again and again and again, at least a dozen times. Observing the success from the sidelines, the Mennonite Publishing House decided that perhaps a cookbook was spiritual enough for them to be associated with after all. And they came to Mary Emma, begging that they be the publisher in the future. Mary Emma, being the loyal Mennonite she was, agreed. And so after 1970, the Mennonite Publishing House published the reprints and continues to publish them even today. They're up to the 51st printing of the Mennonite Community Cookbook. Over 435,000 copies are already sold, and I have been told that this is the largest number of copies sold of any book by a Mennonite author, Mary Emma's Mennonite Community Cookbook. Although Mary Emma had been single for the first 47 years of her life, in 1960 she married Ira Eby of Hagerstown, Maryland. Ira and his 3 children moved to Virginia. Mary Emma continued to teach at Eastern Mennonite College and also continued as a lifelong member of the Trissels congregation. Anthony and Henry Showalter. The interconnected families of the Showalters and the Funks of Rockingham County, Virginia, produced several nationally known hymn and gospel songwriters. Henry Funk and Barbara Showalter, Jacob and Maria's son-in-law daughter, had a son, Joseph Funk of Singer's Glen, who was known for his singing schools and his songbook, the Harmonia Sacra of 1832. Joseph Funk's Harmonia Sacra has a devoted following right down to the present time, including some in this audience. But I'm not going into Joseph Funk. Instead, I have a different story. When I was a young guy sitting in church, and sometimes the sermons lasted longer than my attention span lasted, I would reach for the hymnal to pass the time. Just paging one page to the next, looking for anything interesting. I noticed the songwriters' names and found out that there were these 2, J. Henry Showalter and A.J. Showalter. I wondered who they were, and I had no way to find out until about a year ago. It turns out they were brothers, both born in Rockingham County, Virginia. They were sons of singing school teacher John Showalter. Anthony, or A.J., as Bill told us, located eventually in Dalton, Georgia, but he was born in Rockingham County. He headed the A.J. Showalter Music Publishing Company. Henry, his brother, ended up in Ohio, where he worked as a singer, teacher, composer, and publisher. Probably the most widely used song that was written by Eddie Showalter was the one we sang this evening, Leaning on the Everlasting Arms, written by A.J. or Anthony. And now we know the background story. The 1927 hymnal of the Mennonites, called the Church Hymnal, included 2 songs by A.J. and 3 by Henry. The Brethren hymnal had many more than that, mostly by Henry, because Henry was a member of the Church of the Brethren. A.J. served in the Presbyterian Church, and both of them were Moab's 4th cousins. So now you know the connection. Jackson Whips Showalter, another 4th cousin to Moab. This man, Jackson, was born in Kentucky. As a young adult, he left his father's Kentucky farm and moved to New York City to compete in chess. This tall Southerner made quite an impression in New York City. He was a fiercely competitive chess player, and yet he had great social skills. That was a combination not found very often with chess players. He was called the Kentucky Lion, named after his birthplace, his thick mane of hair and mustache, and his chess playing strength. Another distant relative, William Joseph Showalter, this man was Moab's second cousin, writer for the National Geographic. He wrote many articles, including this one on how the world is fed. He also wrote a book about the brand new automotive industry. I thought that was ironic in light of his second cousin's opposition to the automobile. Another notable Showalter is my sister Carolyn. Linda mentioned my run this past Saturday. I think my accomplishment is just a tiny fraction of Carolyn's, who completed this ultramarathon for the 30th time. Her name is legendary in Washington County running circles. I am just Carolyn Showalter's little brother. Some of our relatives, more distant, but with our same name, come from Jacob's, our immigrant ancestor's brother Hans, who stayed in the Germany-France border area. Among his descendants are this man, Otto Showalter, 1900 to 1965, pastor of the Hamburg Mennonite Church. Born in Kaplan-Eihof in the southwest corner of Germany, he stayed for 35 years in the Hamburg Autonomous Mennonite Church in the northeast, the exact opposite corner of Germany, an urban congregation. He brought this congregation back together after the devastating and scattering it experienced in World War I. And that's another story. I won't pursue that anymore tonight. Another relative in Germany, Paul Showalter, Mennonite pastor at Weierholz from the 1940s through 1980. And this man, also known as Otto Showalter, same name as the man 2 screens ago, this one is the nephew of the first one. He's a retired farmer, Mennonite pastor, and historian. Otto is the Showalter historian in Europe, who I believe is more knowledgeable than anyone else. Otto is from Deutschhof, Kaplan-Eihof area, and this map shows Hamburg, where his uncle Otto went to be pastor. And I had the privilege of having a meal and lodging in Otto and Bertie's home. Another Showalter, Jacob Abraham Showalter from Kansas. I've heard of this organization called Showalter Foundation. They were a sponsor of my daughter's mission trip to Ecuador. And he was a single man who farmed and did ag-related business, died with quite a fortune and left it all in a foundation to support church causes. So he's a figure that we're pleased to be related to. And with that, we've completed the stories. Maybe there will be more stories another time. But that's all for now. Thank you.
Wow. Linda, thank you so very much, not just for researching and compiling all this interesting information and material, but for taking the time to organize it and present it to us in such a fascinating way. I doubt that anyone here, except maybe Ruthie, has any idea of all the time and effort and energy that you put into this and shared with us so freely tonight. Very interesting, and things we wouldn't know otherwise. So thank you so much for doing that. I'm sure that we all have a deeper appreciation of our forefathers and where we came from, and I hope a greater realization of the responsibility that we have to treasure and handle carefully the good and godly heritage that we enjoy so much. So thank you all again very much for coming. It's been a real pleasure to share this evening with you, and I hope it won't be long until we're together again. There are future possible, at least, Showalter events in the making. I believe you have a paper that has some of them listed on, possibly a Shank Showalter tour in Washington County, a Showalter tour in Rockingham County, Virginia, and either in 2018 or 2019, a Showalter history tour in Europe. Wouldn't that be fascinating? Also, the reminder that if you didn't receive a letter or letters about this evening and would like to in the future, send your address to Linden at Linden, L-I-N-D-E-N, at showalterhistory.com. Is that right? That's right. Okay. And then also a reminder that the Showalter Museum, the one-day, few-hour Showalter Museum, is still open for maybe a half an hour or so. And then our evening is concluded. So thank you all again very, very